Imagine the Atlantic endless and indifferent. It is the early 1600s, and fragile ships brimming with hope, fear, and determination pushed through turbulent waters toward a continent unknown. On these decks stand men, women, and children chasing opportunity, fleeing oppression, or simply desperate to survive. They are not conquerors, yet they will lay the first stones of a global power. North America was a patchwork of forests, rivers, and plains, home to civilizations thousands of years old. Yet European settlers approached it as an empty canvas, ripe for cultivation and conquest. The collision of cultures here will shape centuries of conflict, negotiation, and synthesis. Native peoples, with centuries of knowledge about the land, clashed with settlers who possessed guns, ideas of ownership, and an insatiable hunger for expansion. From these beginnings, the concept of a new world emerges, a place where energy, ideas, and ambition converge. Colonial towns spring up along rivers, ports grow into centers of trade. Early governance is experimental, blending European tradition with necessity, born improvisation. Town meetings, charters, and rudimentary laws are early seeds of a political culture that prizes participation, debate, and the restless questioning of authority. Yet even in these fledgling communities, contradictions fester. The same lands that promise liberty are nourished by the labor of enslaved people. Freedom was built on the oppression of others. It is in this paradox, liberty intertwined with bondage, that the first lessons of American power are encoded. The nation's rise will always depend on balancing ambition with morality, innovation with ethics. By the mid-1700s, the colonies have matured into distinct societies. English, Dutch, French influences shaping law, trade, religion, and thought. Education flourishes, printing presses disseminate ideas, and networks of commerce link the Atlantic world. These developments are subtle yet profound, creating an environment where ideas matter as much as arms, where trade, knowledge, and ingenuity can wield influence. When revolution arrives, it is not just about independence. It is the assertion of autonomy, of self-determination. The Declaration of Independence is more than a document. It is a declaration of potential, a signal to the world that this new society intends to carve its own destiny. The colonies, forged in hardship, are learning the most crucial skill of any superpower, the ability to organize, to mobilize, and to imagine a future beyond immediate survival. It's a soft swell of strings, rising tension, sense of anticipation. The seeds of power were not sown in guns or gold alone. They were planted in the minds of those who believed that they could shape a nation from hope. By the 1770s, the colonies had grown confident, restless, and questioning. What began as complaints over taxes and regulations transformed into a profound challenge to authority itself. Ordinary men and women, once subjects of an empire, now dared to imagine governance defined by consent, not by decree. The American Revolution was not merely a military struggle. It was a battle of ideas. On one side, the British Empire wielded centuries of military tradition, immense wealth, and rigid hierarchy. On the other, farmers, artisans, merchants, and intellectuals fought with conviction, ingenuity, and an unwavering belief in their right to self-determination. Muskets and cannons were only the surface. At its heart, the war was a test of whether a new vision of society could prevail. The Declaration of Independence codified this vision: liberty, equality, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet, even in its boldest moments, it was a document of paradox. Slavery remained legal, women remained excluded, indigenous nations were ignored. The revolutionary generation grappled with the limits of their ideals. Yet the idea itself was potent, electric, unstoppable. Victory came through resilience and strategy. From Valley Forge's freezing hardships to the tactical genius of commanders like George Washington, the colonies proved that courage, unity, and adaptability can overcome superior resources. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 recognized independence, but the work of nation building had only begun. The new United States faced immense challenges, establishing governance, creating a stable economy, and navigating the tensions between states' rights and federal authority. The Constitution and Bill of Rights emerged as instruments not merely of law, but of principle, designed to balance liberty with order. The young nation learned to wield its authority thoughtfully, a lesson critical for any country aspiring to lasting power. Even in these early decades, America began to project influence beyond its borders. Trade, diplomacy, and strategic alliances hinted at a nation capable of shaping international events. Education and innovation flourished, creating a culture where ideas mattered as much as armies. These were the foundations of power, intangible yet decisive, setting the stage for future dominance. Yet challenges persisted. Internal divisions, regional disparities, and unresolved injustices, particularly the institution of slavery, threatened cohesion. The lesson was clear: for power to endure, a nation must confront its contradictions, adapt, and innovate. This ability to reconcile ambition with principle, to govern while experimenting, is what would later define America's rise to superpower status. So sound swells, drums merge with hopeful strings, symbolizing resilience and potential. Victory in revolution was not just freedom from empire. It was the first assertion of a nation's ability to shape its own destiny, to imagine power without domination, and to learn the lessons that history would demand. The 19th century was America's proving ground. The young republic that had survived revolution now faced a grand challenge to expand, industrialize, and establish itself as a force in the world. Geography, innovation, and sheer determination combined to shape a nation that was restless, ambitious, and hungry for influence. Westward expansion became both a practical necessity and a symbol of national identity. Manifest destiny captured the imagination, the belief that the nation was destined to stretch from ocean to ocean. Yet this vision came with contradictions. Indigenous nations were displaced. Wars were fought. Entire cultures were uprooted. The expansion of territory demanded both creativity and moral reckoning. The United States learned early that growth and justice often collide, and that true power requires balancing ambition with responsibility. Meanwhile, industrialization transformed the economy and society. Steam engines carried goods across rivers and plains. Railroads shrank distances and connected markets. Factories multiplied and urban centers swelled. Entrepreneurs, inventors, and laborers created unprecedented wealth, while cities became incubators of innovation. Technological advances, from the telegraph to the cotton gin, amplified the nation's capacity for production, communication, and influence. Yet power is not built by innovation alone. Social tensions intensified. Slavery remained entrenched in the South, while labor disputes and immigrant struggles reshaped northern cities. The nation faced profound questions. Could economic and technological growth coexist with liberty and equality? These tensions were not abstract. They demanded solutions that would test the very survival of the Republic. The Civil War was the crucible. Between 1861 and 1865, America confronted its deepest contradictions. Union and Confederate armies clashed, brother against brother, while the fate of 4 million enslaved people hung in the balance. Victory in the North preserved the Union and abolished slavery, but the cost was enormous. Lives, infrastructure, and trust were shattered. Yet from this fire, a stronger, more unified nation emerged, capable of sustaining influence beyond its borders. Reconstruction and industrial growth in the late 19th century solidified America's trajectory. Railroads, steel, and energy-fueled cities, commerce, and global trade. Immigration enriched the labor force and diversified culture. Innovation became the nation's signature. Inventiveness was not just a practical tool, but a source of identity and global credibility. By the turn of the 20th century, the United States was no longer an isolated experiment. It was an emergent power with economic, technological, and human resources that positioned it to influence global events. The lessons were clear. Power comes from capacity, ingenuity, and resilience. Expansion without vision leads to chaos. Industrial growth without principle risks injustice. The United States learned to combine ambition with strategy, innovation with adaptability. The hallmarks of a rising superpower. It's the sound of trains fading into bustling cities and the hum of early electricity. The nation awakening. America did not simply grow, it transformed, proving that influence is born from vision, labor, and the courage to confront both opportunity and consequence. As the 20th century dawned, America faced a choice: remain a distant observer of global conflict, or step boldly onto the world stage. Industrial capacity, population growth, and innovation had created potential, but potential alone does not define a superpower. Influence required engagement, vision, and the willingness to bear immense responsibility. World War I became the first test. Initially reluctant, the United States eventually committed men, money, and strategy to a distant conflict, tipping the balance in favor of the Allies. The war's end elevated the nation's global credibility, though Europe remained dominant culturally and diplomatically. The United States had demonstrated that it could project power effectively, decisively, and with moral authority. Yet the interwar years were a time of reflection and preparation. Economically, the 1920s were exuberant, with rapid industrial growth, technological innovation, and cultural flourishing. Jazz, cinema, and mass communication. Yet beneath this brilliance lay fragility. The Great Depression exposed vulnerabilities in finance, governance, and social structure. Millions faced unemployment, hunger, and despair. Once again, the nation learned that resilience, the ability to confront crisis, adapt, and innovate, is as important as ambition in sustaining influence. Then came World War II. This global conflict demanded a level of coordination, production, and strategic vision unlike anything before. America mobilized its industrial might, innovating at a breathtaking pace. Tanks, ships, aircraft, and eventually the atomic bomb. Factories, previously producing consumer goods, became engines of war. The nation's workforce, men and women, citizens and immigrants, united with a single purpose: to defeat tyranny and reshape the world. Victory in 1945 was transformative. Europe lay devastated, Asia battered, colonial empires weakened. The United States emerged not just victorious, but dominant. Militarily, economically, and technologically. Institutions such as the United Nations, the Bretton Woods system, and global alliances were shaped with American leadership, embedding influence into international structures. America's rise was no accident. It was the result of decades of expansion, industrialization, and strategic foresight. Yet superpower status is more than arms and money. It is rooted in ideas. Democracy, innovation, and the ability to inspire others became as critical as factories or fleets. America had proven that global influence requires moral credibility, technological edge, and the capacity to act decisively. Lessons that would define its role in the coming Cold War. The sound of ships, planes, and marching footsteps fades into a soft, patriotic orchestral swell. By stepping onto the world stage, America transformed potential into power, ambition into influence, and vision
with World War II
into
behind
a blueprint. America faced a new kind of struggle, one that would test not armies, but ideology. The Cold War was a conflict of systems, a battle between democracy and communism, capitalism and state control, freedom and oppression. The United States emerged as a global leader, not by conquest, but by vision, the promise of prosperity, liberty, and the ability to shape the future through ideas as well as power. The stakes were monumental. Europe was in ruins. Asia burned with revolution and recovery. The Soviet Union loomed as a rival superpower, technologically capable, ideologically uncompromising, and determined to expand its influence. The United States, in response, leveraged its unparalleled industrial and military capacity, forging alliances through NATO, committing to aid programs like the Marshall Plan, and projecting its influence across continents. Yet this was a war without direct, large-scale battles. It was fought in shadows, proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam, espionage across capitals, space races beyond the atmosphere, and the competition for hearts and minds across the globe. The United States learned that true superpower status required not just firepower, but strategy, intelligence, and the ability to innovate under pressure. Innovation became the hallmark of American strength. The space race captured the imagination of the world, culminating in Apollo 11's historic moon landing in 1969. Nuclear deterrence, technological research, and global communication networks all reinforced the United States' ability to influence outcomes without direct domination. Power was now as much about ideas, credibility, and capacity as it was about tanks or ships. Domestically, the nation grappled with its own ideals. Civil rights movements challenged systemic racism. Women demanded equality, and marginalized communities fought for recognition. These internal struggles were not distractions. They were integral to America's rise. A superpower cannot inspire others abroad while denying justice at home. By confronting these challenges, the United States strengthened its moral authority and resilience. By the 1980s, the Cold War was entering its final stages. Diplomacy, intelligence, and the relentless pressure of technological, economic, and cultural influence brought the Soviet Union to its knees. America had demonstrated that sustained global power. depends not solely on victory in war, but on consistent projection of ideas, innovation, and the capacity to adapt to a rapidly changing world. So, sound of rockets launching, cities bustling, and orchestral strings building to a crescendo. In the quiet tension of the Cold War, America proved that true superpower status is not seized in a moment, but cultivated over decades through vision, resilience, and the courage to shape the world without domination. With the Cold War behind it, the United States entered a new era. One defined less by tanks and missiles, and more by information, innovation, and cultural influence. The collapse of the Soviet Union left a vacuum that America stepped into. Not through coercion alone, but through the power of ideas, trade, and technology. The internet, personal computing, and digital communications transformed society at an unprecedented pace. Cities, industries, and entire economies became interconnected. Information flowed across borders in real time, connecting people, markets, and governments. American companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and countless others, became global symbols of innovation, shaping the way humans work, learn, and communicate. But superpower status is never just technological. Culture became a force of influence. Hollywood, music, literature, and television exported American ideals worldwide of freedom, individualism, opportunity. Soft power proved as vital as military might. Through storytelling, art, and media, the United States shaped aspirations, norms, and perceptions across continents. Yet power was tested by crisis. Terrorist attacks, economic recessions, and regional conflicts demanded rapid response and strategic thinking. The United States had to navigate a world where threats were no longer confined to battlefields, but to networks, ideologies, and global markets. Leadership required adaptability, intelligence, and resilience, qualities that had been cultivated over centuries of trial, triumph, and failure. Domestically, America grappled with its identity. Civil rights movements, debates over equality, and shifting demographics challenged the nation to live up to its ideals. Democracy, once fragile, matured under pressure. The lessons were clear: power requires integrity at home to be credible abroad. Influence requires consistency between words and actions. By the early 21st century, the United States had solidified its superpower status. Military, economic, technological, and cultural influence intersected to create a nation capable of shaping global trends, crises, and solutions. Yet, it remained clear that power is not static. History, geography, technology, and human ambition ensure that influence must be continuously earned and defended. The sound of digital beeps blending with orchestral crescendos. A nation connected, awake, and evolving to AVCHISTIN. America's rise to global prominence is a story of vision, courage, and adaptability. It is the story of a nation that learned to innovate, to inspire, and to lead. Not through domination alone, but by shaping the possibilities of the modern world. Superpower status is not given, it is built. Through ideas, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of influence that uplifts, inspires, and shapes the future.